this through this third-party connection. I got an invite to actually take part in what you might call a séance or a cult gathering, and it was a full eyes wide shut caper. A limousine arrived, and you got hooded. You were told before you left to bring nothing metallic on you, and that at the time anyway you'd be given clothes to wear, a cloak to wear when you enter this coven, this church, this cult building, which you drove around. I was in Wellington, and we drove for I think half an hour or so. I had no idea whereabouts in Wellington we might have been with the hood on. And we were escorted up the steps into this church-like building. I didn't actually see the outside of it, but from the inside, it was painted matte black. Everywhere was matte black. And I have a sneaking suspicion there'd be no metal in that building at all. No wooden nails. I think it would have been completely made of wood.
No.
And inside it was matte black, and the only light was from candles. And we were given robes to wear. We were completely stripped down and given robes to wear. You could not have any rings on your fingers, and if you had metal fillings, you were told to keep your mouth shut at all times.
You would have been a bit worried about this scenario, wouldn't you?
Well, I mean, I was so intrigued. I mean, wouldn't you be intrigued to get on the inside of what really might go on in the higher powers, and who's running this country, who's running this planet, who's running New Zealand? And the opportunity was to get an apprentice course in this. I mean, this wasn't going to be the highest level, of course, because this was my introduction. But I was being invited because there was a possibility I could become a member if all went well.
Surely they would have perhaps known that you were who you were.
Well, don't forget, I was being recommended by someone on the inside.
Yeah. Okay.
So you could say I had served some form of apprenticeship, or they would have screened me out, and this person was prepared to lie on my identity and then recommend me because she'd been shafted evidently quite badly by some of the higher members of this hierarchy, and she was prepared to get someone else on the inside that might be able to do some good of it at a later date. And it was a dangerous job. You know, it was just the thought, if something went wrong or they discovered who I was, I might not see the light of day again. So, it was really stupidity of the highest order. But I'd got to the point where, having been in jail and the government of New Zealand had thrown everything at me, they'd confiscated everything I owned during the 1989 through the 1994 episode, which was all in co-evolution anyway. I felt I had nothing to lose. At that stage I was sort of a freelance agent. I didn't have a house, I didn't have any particular chattels. I had a nice car and I had a little bit of money in the bank, and I was running a business, a self-funding business. So I was a free agent. And I thought, if this all goes wrong, the only person going to get hurt is me. And anyway, so this limousine arrives and drives me to wherever the hell we were in Wellington, or on the outskirts of Wellington, probably more likely on the outskirts of Wellington, not in Wellington Central. And I arrive at this building, and I was escorted up some steps, not being able to see where I was going. I was, someone at my side, and entered this building, and we got these cloaks were blood red on the inside, silk garment on the inside, black hood, and we were told to wear the hood at all times and not to look directly at anyone standing alongside us. Ooh, so in other words, you pull the hood
who could
over,
they have been?
so you can't see who is standing alongside you. And we were ushered into, and say no metal allowed, I'll explain why later. We were ushered into a sort of a auditorium, and there was a stage in front of us, and we were sort of up a few tiers, standing in a sort of a semicircle, and there was a ritual going on stage, and I won't go into any details, but it was pretty barbarous, and it was pretty with sexual connotations and a lot of sort of X-rated stuff happening. And at the point, at a crucial point, there was all I could see from the candle lights was a very high vaulted sort of a hall-like main building that we were in, and because it was matte black, it didn't reflect any light, but I get the impression that the ceiling was very high above us, maybe 40, 50 feet, I don't know, just it went out of sight anyway. And a shaft of lightning, or bolt of lightning, or a shaft of light came from the ceiling straight down onto the stage. And I swear there was a being, a fire-like being stood there.
Wow.
And I don't know whether electricity was involved or not, but I could understand maybe why there was no metal being worn, you know. And then this thing scanned the whole crowd, and when it got to me, it stopped. Fortunately, if you read Coevolution, I'd been trained on how to blank my thoughts and not be read. And it sort of froze when this thing sort of, if it had a face, was looking at me. And I just wiped everything I possibly could from my mind, and then it just continued on around. Scanned the crowd. And I can't really tell you much about what happened after that.
Did you get a feeling off this being? Was it like, did it radiate, I don't know, evil? Or did it feel ominous? Or
I was not trying to engage it. So I was trying to keep very neutral. And I was scared. I was, to the point where if I'd been any more afraid, I might have given myself away, because everyone else was probably more relaxed with it.
You get the feeling that it was searching for a victim or a sacrifice?
No, I think it was just making sure that everyone was kosher.
Yeah. Right.
And it did stop at me, maybe because I was new, but also maybe I was radiating something I shouldn't have. But as soon as I switched off, become neutral, carbon neutral, if you say.
Feeling it was trying to read you?
Yes,
absolutely.
maybe.
Yeah.
And fortunately, I'd had very good schooling on how to blank your thoughts at the deepest level.
So I'm here talking with Alec Newald. He's telling us about some of his more recent experiences, which are quite astounding. So we'd hope to be sharing some more information about some of the more recent perhaps communiques or understandings that you have of where we are as a people, and what's happening with the extraterrestrials that you are perhaps in contact with. And off camera, I have a friend who shall be going by the name of Kiwi Off.
Mr. X.
Mr. X.
Just call me Mulder.
Mr. X.
Who will be offering some questions.
It's just if you read the latest edition of Coev, it's got a Mr. X in there, but he's South African, so you're pretty safe. Your accent doesn't match. One thing that I've never included in Coevolution and is related to ongoing stuff that's happening and your own experiences, Guy, they're not all friendly. Extraterrestrials are not always all chummy and biodegradable. I've been very fortunate. I think if you read the latest edition of Coev, you'll see that it's actually a family group. And I don't call my experience an abduction, but it's alien recovery, because obviously in a past life, my past connections are with them, and that's why they were bemused that I didn't remember any of it. None of them have reincarnated here on planet Earth. They don't realise that your memory tapes get wiped when you come down here of past lives. But everybody has past lives for sure. Multitude of past lives, perhaps millions of them.
Yet for me, there's this deep down inside knowing. Yeah. You don't necessarily need to see the pictures or have past life recalls. Somewhere inside, deep down, you know.
You're comfortable with it. We're
not alone, and you're driven to find out. You're driven to find out who's out there, what's happening with Earth, and what can we do about it.
Yeah, well, I think that one of the most important things is, we were talking earlier on, Mr. X, and Guy, is to protect yourself maybe, and to maybe identify who your foes would be, just as you would in a street with strangers. Not all humans are friendly, and you don't want to go down a dark alley somewhere where there might be lurking someone with bad intentions. And I think the night sky is full of bad intentions as much as it's full of good ones. And a friend of mine, Trevor James Constable, which is an ex-Kiwi, he said when he's been living in the States for many years, and he said that his first input or first discovery was that UFOs that put out a sort of a white light are most generally driven by the bad guys. The multicoloured UFOs are quite more likely to be the friendly guys. So if you take nothing else from that, if you see a white glowing object come and plant itself next to you, maybe run and don't put your hand out to shake.
Unfortunately, most of the ones I've seen have been white.
Yeah, well, there you go. And it's my belief that a lot of ETs are not quite what they appear to be.
Some of them have agendas.
Well,
there are things that they need from us as much as we need, or as much
there's that, but some of them are not actually extraterrestrial at all. Some of them live here, and maybe they live in an inner Earth or another dimensional transcript of Earth, or in a neighbouring reality which is really not out there, it's here. And they just pop into our reality. And if you do a lot of research on Wilhelm Reich, I think his discovery of the negative ETs are quite likely live here but in another dimension. Live just outside of this reality, but they do not come from another planet, another solar system, another galaxy.
We're so much into linear thinking that there are lateral movements. There's a way to step in and out of our reality that doesn't involve moving from here to there.
That's right. They could come from another timeline. They could be another form of us, or they just could be in another dimensional entity.
Above.
Yeah, and Wilhelm Reich discovered a way.
Thinking it's got to be this or it's got to be that, and that's where we're often led astray. Everything you can think of exists right now.
Yep.
And all the possibilities that come with it exist right now. Time then there's no real past, present or future. There really is only now, because when you think of the past, you're projecting to the past. When you're thinking of the future, you're projecting, and that's the key thing, as Alex has said, that everything we think we know is wrong.
Well, Wilhelm Reich suggested that the UFOs that he had interactions with, or were attracted to him by his experimentation into the etheric engineering, were definitely negative, and definitely were bleeding off energy and light from our reality, and bleeding off almost life force, and they were creating desert-like environments.
And this has been touched on in a lot of movies. You'll get some beings that just get off on the fact that they're getting us upset.
Yeah.
Psychopathic beings, perhaps. Yeah. They do that. I mean, you say, what kind of person would enjoy rape? Well, obviously some do.
Yeah. Well,
that's a horrible thought.
When his when his etheric engineering started, when he could actually beam and aim these machines at these UFOs, he actually could blink them out of our reality, drive them off. And it's amazing that as soon as he started doing that, the men in black arrived, if you like, or Earth-type authority figures, and took him out of business and sent him to jail, bankrupted him basically, sent him to jail and killed him. I mean, that was the end of his reality. They wiped him out. And yet he was trying to negate these, what you might call evil UFOs. And as I say, probably not spacemen at all, probably inner Earth or that type of reality. So there is definitely, if people are going to open themselves up psychically to other entities that may be living in other realities alongside of our own, discretion is, I think, required. Indeed. And you need to read widely and deeply from other people's experiences to take care, and maybe you can find out shortcut or some manner or means to defend yourself.
I just recently reread Co-Evolution, and from Xena and her people, They seem to have this positive, well, Xena in particular, this positive emotional connection and empathy. Do you feel? I mean, do you feel that they're good? I mean, they have a program to develop hybrid to become more like us. Is that correct?
Well, this is it. When the few interactions I had with the elder race, which are the more original ETs, their emotions were very bland, very neutral.
Think of Mr. Spock.
Mm.
Yeah, nothing evil about that. They just don't exuberate, great joy or sadness. But Xena was, as I say, part human.
Mm.
So the problem, which I touched on in coevolution, was that the elders didn't know how to interact with a race of their own, the hybrids, which were showing emotional capabilities, and Xena was one of them. And so yeah, the difference was that they had similar feelings about things than we do, and I think that might be a rarity, and maybe because of the hybrid breeding program where maybe Xena was 50% human, so I wasn't really dealing with another creature from another reality. It was half and half.
Well, when I was dealing with the Greys, that they had a very intellectual basis for interaction, and emotion was something that they just couldn't seem to deal with or understand at all. And though it seems that that's their goal is to find this, to return to this emotional state, to get back that sense of individuality, or what that emotional basis. And but I don't think it's very difficult, because they're coming at it from an intellectual standpoint, and they're controlling their hybrids intellectually in a way that, from the sounds of it, it's different to the way the elders are treating Xena, and because they're allowing her to flourish and to expand in her emotional.
Well, I don't know whether the Greys are ever intending. I mean, my personal belief is that the Greys live here anyway. They're trying to integrate into our society for a different reason. And I can't speak for them because I've never had interactions. It would be guesswork, and it would be pointless me even making a comment. But I only can comment on the elders that I had to deal with. And they do intend for a future race to live here. And I think it would be vital that they be similar to us. If they want to interact or in some way communicate with us and understand us, they would be outcasts in our society if they were soulless, if you like. Not soulless, but emotionless. They would never be able to comprehend what we're on about. So I think there's a reasoning for them to want to have some human emotion. But there's another factor going on here too, and if you read some material that's out on the internet more recently, is that human beings were designed to be emotional, to put out emotional, how could you explain it, to put out emotional energy. And this is food for some entities. And it may well be that planet Earth is a farmyard of emotional energy.
Both positive and negative?
Of course, it doesn't actually matter. I think if you feed off emotions, the strongest emotion could be fear, it could be hatred, it could be love. Whatever, it's similar. The energy is similar. So therefore, I mean, when you eat jelly beans, does it matter if you eat black ones or red ones or yellow ones?
And yet everyone will have a favourite.
Of course. but I've been saying, so you pick your jelly bean, doesn't really matter. It's jelly bean's jelly bean, whether it's dark or white or black.
That's probably the sugar fix.
And it would appear, I mean, I don't know this for certain, but it makes a lot of sense, because nowhere else in the universe does there appear to be a race so emotional. I don't know anybody that's had extraterrestrial interactions with base type races, founding races like the elders, that have emotions. It seems to be a human trait. We seem to be manufactured to be emotional. We are extremely emotional. I mean, all religions are. I mean,
fear.
all the wars that have been raged on this planet, most of them are to do with religious beliefs, and the emotional connection between one religion and another fighting each other is enough to exterminate each other. So they're so, well, it's difficult to find the right words to describe it, but it makes sense if you think that we exist because of our emotions, and we are different to everybody else because we've been designed that way.
And there are so many of them that are so interested in us for that reason.
It could well be. And whether certain, say, it doesn't even have to be a negative thing to be feeding off our emotions. It's just, this is the way of the universe. As we grow, breed cows and sheep and use them for our food, you might think that's the most evil thing you could possibly do. You know, a poor old little animal there being bred and cultured especially, and fattened up even, and bred to get fatter. And sheep that, you know, or sheep that produce twins are coveted by farmers more than sheep that will only produce one offspring. So therefore they cull out all the ones that can't produce twins and only breed the ones that will produce, you know, dual crops, if you like, and then we eat them.
Yeah, well then again, look at the human race, look how we're being fattened up.
So if an extraterrestrial race or some higher being or whatever entity lives off emotions, it feeds off our emotions, so what? I mean, that's of no consequence at all to us. It doesn't kill us.
No.
For them to feed off that energy. It's actually a very a sustainable culture.
Biodiversity.
I mean, it might be that they stir the pot occasionally and make wars or encourage wars or encourage hatred or encourage love, because it gives bountiful food. So
but it's interesting you touch on that idea, because it's even been put out there that for some alien races, we are food, literally.
We are food, we are
we
physical.
could be food in a physical sense.
Physically consumed,
Yes.
just like we eat a nice steak.
Yes, I
or
believe
whatever.
it's possible.
And okay, maybe there's a good argument there to become vegetarian, but I mean, even plants have thoughts. They've proven it. What do you do?
I've got no direct evidence of that. I've only got third-party evidence that this could be going
playing
on.
heavy metal music
But
to plants, and you'll find
I
out.
do not. I would not reject it. I mean, I'm open-minded. I've seen enough to never naysay anything that
That's the
anyone
idea.
says.
Absorb everything.
Yeah,
Everything is possible.
you have to
If
have
you
an
think of
open
it exists
mind
somewhere.
that there's a possibility, because it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And that's all we, our personal quest, isn't it? That's all we can go on, what
Yeah.
feels right to us.
Yeah.
You were talking about the hybridization program. Were you voluntary take part in? Are there children? Are there young Alec?
There
hybrids?
might be. I'm not going to really comment on that, but we need to go a level above what you might interact, or what you might conceive as interaction on a breeding program. We're talking in a lot of cases here of non-physical selves, what might be called our pure consciousness. And I firmly believe that when I was abducted, but when I was recovered from planet Earth, I didn't have my physical body. There might have been some aspects of my physical body that was required for this program, but in actual fact I think I was given another body to dwell in while I was off planet. And it's my consciousness and my inherent being that they were just as interested in splicing.
So you can actually, everything arises from consciousness, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So all it would need, perhaps, is your consciousness to create.
Well, if they could reincarnate down here into a physical human body, you think what's actually arriving? I mean, you get the 3D workhorse, the mechanics of a human body, but if the only thing that really makes us different to an animal, to a sheep or a dog, is our consciousness, which comes with it, our self-awareness, then that's what they want to inherit. That's what they want to bring with them.
Yeah.
Because if they
So
come
the
down
farm.
here completely devoid of their past life experiences and they don't know who they are, they won't be any different to us. And I think they've developed a consciousness within themselves who they are fully aware of who they are, to a much deeper understanding than we do. And they do not want to come down here and totally abandon that. It's like not very many people in a Western country would want to go and live native forever again. To go and live in a mud hut.
Exactly, as you quite rightly put it.
Very
it's
difficult.
Co-evolution.
Yeah.
It's the next step in our evolution and theirs.
Yeah.
So
But they don't want to give up anything they've already got. That's the thing.
Yeah, they're
They
thinking.
want to hold on to what they've got, but the problem is because of their lack of the emotional, in some cases, some creatures, if you want to, or some beings, if you want to put it that way, they simply can't make that understanding. In other words, because they've never experienced these emotions, they don't want to lose what they've got. Remember, some of these beings are very into their technology. Maybe that was their downfall. They started to clone instead of reproduce by physical methods like we do. They've lost that ability. And the old story, if you don't use it, you lose it. So yeah, they have to go backward in order to go forward.
Yeah.
So is that what you see? What do you see as their long-term goal? Becoming one with us in the same community with them, fully aware of who they are and where they've come from.
It's just like discovering another country on the planet that we hadn't seen before, and there are other people living there that we've never interacted with. It wouldn't be any different to that. You know, it's like there's still some tribes in the Amazon that do not, well, they're deliberately not, and in the Western world is rightfully so taken a step back and allowed them their culture unimpinged by our own realities. And I think what we're going to have is one of those sort of cultures, be it extraterrestrial, arriving on Earth, and then we're going to have to somehow assimilate them into our reality, and it's going to be a very tender, gentle process, because they're going to be very sensitive certain aspects of life here, and we are going to have to be culturally very sensitive too. Otherwise it's not going to work.
Which is often not the human forte on Earth, to be
The
sensitive.
human race has with a human race.
Yes,
we don't
indeed.
even like our neighbour next door because he might be from a different country, even though physically he's the same as us, and maybe
We can interbreed with them, but yet still we consider them to be
unknown
weird.
quantity.
Yeah.
And how would an Amazonian Indian, for example, interpret a helicopter landing in their backyard?
I don't think we're, unfortunately, anywhere. While we have opposing religions on this planet, let alone opposing races, we're nowhere near ready to accept an extraterrestrial race.
We are a type 0 civilization.
Yeah.
We haven't even reached first stage.
Yeah. and the whole concept of coevolution was that we are about to go through some form of transformation.
Yes.
We are about to go through an awakening and understanding. And when, and only when that happens, they will declare themselves. So
Within on a more mutual level.
yeah,
of
I was
understanding.
almost to the understanding that maybe, you know, the Mayan calendar, the 2012, 2013, was, when you think about it, maybe that was the sort of transformation I was hoping
a lot of
for.
people say
Not the end of
happened,
yeah,
but it did.
Well, it might
did.
be happening right now, but while we're
It's
having
happening
this
today.
conversation here now, that maybe 50 or 60 or 70 years ago we would never have been here
Exactly.
now, because people like you and I didn't exist, or if they did, they were so few and far between. You would have had to have travelled for 10,000 miles to meet another one.
Right. Well, this was a program. You've got David Wilcock on one hand, and sort of, and he's really not responsible for this. It's just the way people interpret it. I think everybody was suddenly expecting either a second coming, golden lights, flying saucers landing, peace in the world, a one big day event, Kabar, or they were expecting the sort of catastrophic 2012 movie type event where everything just went boom. And neither happened.
Well, in the Nexus,
It probably won't
in
happen.
the latest Nexus magazine, and in several articles that have been written on the internet since and before, there is a scientific, I think it's theory, but a scientific fact that there are some interesting looking energy clouds descending on our central galactic centre. And nobody knows scientifically or credibly yet what that might create. But there's plenty of people that say it's not a black hole we've got in the middle of our galaxy, but basically a superstar. So it's the opposite to a black hole. It's a very energetic entity. You call it a living planet, call it whatever you like, but whatever it is, it's the centre of our universe because it's the centre of our galaxy. And whatever's coming towards it could set off a huge event of some description, which may send all sorts of different energies through our galactic arms. And there's even been suggestions that the sun has a lot to do with our consciousness and our intelligence and how we evolve.
Gravity as well.
Yeah. And so if something in our galactic centre triggers, almost instantly we could become different entities, simply because our intellect is kick-started, you know.
Yeah. I think it's happening on a second-by-second basis.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that is added into that collective consciousness, for lack of a better word, is adding to the stew.
And as we
Well,
create, as we grow and
yeah.
evolve,
Well,
we increase.
Extraterrestrials, which are far more technically advanced and are far more aware of what's going on out in our outer galactic centres. We're one little pinprick way the hell out in an arm, but these people maybe have travelled the whole of the galaxy. I don't know. They're much more likely to know what's coming and what could happen. Maybe they've seen it before. So if you read a lot of Duncan Rhodes' friends and that, like Robert Munro, who far journeys and and he said when he went out of body and went out into the cosmos, there are a whole queue of ET craft out there waiting to watch to see what happens on planet Earth when this cosmic bombardment arrives. Yeah. And if they're smart enough to be out there in spacecraft ready to watch, then they must know something's on its way that we are not aware of. And I'm just thinking, this is something that's been happening or preparing to happen for 20 or 30 years. But of course, to someone whose time means nothing outside of our reality, 20 or 30 years, maybe 20 minutes.
Blink of an eye.
Yeah.
Well, it would be nice if it happened in the next 2 or 3 years, wouldn't it?
Well,
it would be
the whole prime set of coevolution is that when this happens, then we will see ET manifest on and not just the elders from Haven. I mean, multitudes of them will come and shake our hands because we will have become adults from children.
The moment we're children playing with dangerous
and they know if they come down here and upset us or trigger something off in the wrong, there could be a nuclear holocaust tomorrow type of scenario. Maybe not nuclear, but they could set the whole world afire, if you know what I mean, by being in the wrong place. And they're far more responsible.
They really wanted to do that, but that goes against the natural way.
Yep.
And they're
patient. They've been waiting maybe for 10,000 years or 100,000 years, and if it happens tomorrow or 100 years from now, it's not tomorrow to them.
Well, as mythical history would have it, the asteroid belt was once a planet with
Marduk,
I think, that allegedly were very warlike. They were very much like the Nazi way of thinking. The whole planet, very totalitarian, very police state oriented.
Like
very
the
much
Anunnaki.
like Kim Jong-un
That's the way the
is
Anunnaki
doing.
reckon,
And hey, if you don't do it our way, we'll just blow the hell out of you.
Yeah.
Well, they got taught a lesson. And I love it. If you go right back to the original black and white movie of The Day the Earth Stood Still, when the friendly alien arrives and say, hey, you'll be allowed to do this, but you've got to put down your silly toys and stop blowing. You only live on one planet. Stop looking at yourselves as separate little islands and things like that. You've got one planet. Either one of these islands is capable of blowing the whole lot away. We will take you out if you don't behave yourselves.
Yeah.
Not saying we're going to. It's like, hey, behave or else.
Yeah, behave yourself. Yeah.
And this is it. There is no more room on the planet for people like the Kim Jong-uns and the Hitlers of the world. That is not progression.
No.
And it's not a case of like, hey, we hate these people. We have to bring them in and show them, hey, look, we don't hate you. You don't have to sit in the playground all on your own with your toys. Yes, we know you've got your toys, but like, chill out.
Yeah.
Forgiveness.
Yes.
Yeah, and seeing that they are a spark of divinity as well, going through their own struggles.
They're going through their own growth and evolution because they've cut themselves off so much from the rest of the world. Of course they're getting left behind.
Yeah.
But now they've got hold of a dangerous toy, and they haven't yet developed the maturity to realise, even back in the old days when America had the nuclear bomb, they weren't going around threatening everybody with a nuclear device. So look at the different way the same technology can be used. They won't be allowed to.
No, I think we've been told by higher powers not to use nuclear
I mean, it
weapons.
wouldn't be the first time that we all know that ETs have interfered with nuclear devices.
I would think that if nuclear war was imminent, it would be...
Because we can wipe ourselves out, and it's not just that. Is nuclear energy is so pure in a bad way. It cuts through all the other dimensions as well. So it's not just us.
It's affecting their
It's affecting
dimensions.
their dimension as well too. I mean, you imagine if there are a group of quite friendly beings living below us, and there's a great deal of evidence to suggest there are many. What do they think of us putting a nuclear bomb through their roof and just blowing it up for the hell of it to see what happens?
No, I'm a great believer that there is an inner earth, that there isn't a
Yeah, I mean, at the
realm.
very least, big cave-like structures, the size of cities.
But
I mean,
as
we've
you
built
say,
them
it
ourselves.
goes through other dimensions on the
But it's-
externally...
I mean, think of the dimensions as being like
invisible
blankets.
dimensions
On this layer,
Yeah.
we can see us. All right, Jupiter to us is this big gaseous ball that if somebody lit a match, it could turn into another sun. But you look at it from another dimensional point of view, and it is physical. And there probably are beings living on that level, and then another level again. It's just another layer of the blanket. We just can't see that layer yet.
So there are other races. Did you meet any, or did you query them too much on?
I didn't know anything about... I mean, I was naive about extraterrestrial stuff. You must remember going back to '89. This was sort of like a bit of a wake-up call for me, and I hadn't studied or read about any of these other races that might be...
This is the day it happened.
So
this
I
is the day
didn't...
you drove into the fog
Yeah,
bank
so
and
I
came
didn't
into
have
the
the database just to start questioning them about other extraterrestrials. Sure, I was curious when I met them. I said, well, the only thing I'd ever seen was somewhere in some picture book somewhere or some magazine was a grey, standard grey entity.
And let's face it, that's the one that's been marketed.
Yeah,
to us.
That's the one that I've seen and met.
Yeah,
so
well,
I've seen too.
I pictured that and I transposed that picture to them. I said, who are these guys? Because that's the only other race I know of. Yeah. And the curious response was, well, they live a lot closer to you than you think. And that's what's always made me start thinking they're not extraterrestrial. Maybe they're inner Earth or outer dimensional.
Well, some are.
Or they're physical and they are here, but they live on the moon. That's my first thought. Well, maybe they live on the moon. And somebody's living up there, I can assure you of that.
Absolutely.
And maybe that is one of their headquarters, quite possibly.
Well, I mean, it said that even a number of races have bases or had
Well,
bases.
yeah, but I didn't have the nous to ask that.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they were feeding
No,
me information
this is
as required. And they didn't want to overload me, and they did not want to feed me information I didn't need to know because I was already assimilating a whole lot of information I did need to know while I was with them. And it was like massive. I mean, even Earth history. But I never went into that other side of extraterrestrial stuff because there was just so much else happening. And it wasn't of any consequence, and it wasn't on my mind because it's not what I'd studied. Sure, I would have a different set of questions to ask them now. But this is 20 and 30 years later.
Yeah.
So
you're going in as an open book.
Yeah, so I did ask them about the greys though, and the answer was quite surprising. These are almost not extraterrestrial.
Well, the other thing is too that we've yet to, maybe we have, discover what I believe will be civilizations where water is a natural environment. In other words, we're going to find, maybe in the deepest, just like the movie The Abyss, where they come across grey-like extraterrestrial beings that have been living here just as long as we have, quite happily, underwater. That might sound like something out of a good science fiction movie, but hey, that's already been put in our consciousness for a reason, either through a movie or through people meeting mermaids or whatever. It's there because we can think of it. It is real. It is there somewhere. Otherwise, it would never have popped into our consciousness in the first
Well,
place.
there's a guy called Gordon Duff that runs a
I know Gordon.
veterans,
I know of him. Yeah, Veterans
American
Today.
veterans
Veterans
website.
Today.
Yeah, Veterans Today.
Yeah, and he's been putting up reports of a skirmish in the Pacific Rim
That's right.
on the American coast,
And
the
Curiosity,
California coast, about there's supposed to have been a very unfriendly group of extraterrestrials set up a base down in
The
that area.
zones that look like jellyfish.
And there were a whole lot of Chinese and American warships out
Yeah.
off that area in the last 6 months, 12 months.
Yeah, another one in the Atlantic and one in
On
Antarctica.
so-called
Yeah.
naval exercises. But
Yeah.
I mean, since when have you ever heard of the Chinese and American naval teams
Working
working
together.
together?
Same as Vietnam, you know.
But
when-
yet
when they went
everybody
into
that
Vietnam.
works on fishing boats off
Yeah.
the California coast and other people that have day boats go out have seen them.
Fascinating.
You've read nothing about it in mainstream
Not at all.
news, but they said, well, it's Chinese ships, there's Chinese warships out there and American warships.
Well, I don't know, does WikiLeaks count as mainstream? Because they even hinted at one of their
Well,
documents
no,
there was
they
an
don't.
Antarctic.
But I mean,
Yeah.
you won't read in the Washington
Some
Post
people
or
don't
the New
know-
Zealand
some people
Herald.
don't even know who he is.
Yeah. But anyway, Gordon Duff's been
Yeah.
quite big on this, and other aspects that are similar things going on. But even Gordon Duff admits that not everything I say can be taken literally, and I interpret that to mean an enemy to who?
Well, he's just
Extraterrestrials
actually
are an
explained. He's a
enemy
member
to
of
the
MJ12.
ruling class
Yeah.
of Earth would not
Yeah.
be an enemy to you and me,
Yeah.
but it would be to the established doctrine of planet Earth.
Yeah.
So when you say a hostile race has arrived here, are they our liberators, I might say, you know? So in other words, and he's hinting that I'm telling you this, I've been told to tell you this, but I'm also hinting not everything I say is exactly as it seems. Now, if you read between the lines,
Yeah.
okay, there are ETs here. They are not necessarily a hostile race, but
Yeah.
there's certainly powers on this planet that don't want them here, and we're trying to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Now, what does that tell you? As soon as the military is waging a war against something, you know it's not going to be for their benefit, so it must be for our benefit. I was reading the paper, and this is 1995, so it's after I had my own experience, and even after I'd started to write the book. And the only reason it caught my attention, it was in the mainstream newspaper. This is the New Zealand Herald of 7th month of 95. And there was an unusual landslide or a slip on the road in the same part of the state highway in the Mamakus that I was driving on, almost in the same exact point where I had my own experience. What happened was that in my own experience I was driving my car along that stretch of road, and the whole road appeared to shake like an earthquake, and I felt that the car was shaking, but maybe the road was shaking, or maybe both were shaking. And these people were driving on the same road. Admittedly, there had been some rain, so there was a chance of a landslip. The road started to shake, according to them, but it created a bit of a landslide in it and knocked their cars off the road. And they were rescued without any loss of life, thank goodness. But there were various parties involved. 3 or 4 cars were involved in this being swept off the road when the landslide happened, and they were travelling in opposite directions. Both people reported that they hadn't intended to be there. They had suddenly changed their plans within the last 12 or 24 hours and decided to do that drive at that point ahead or behind schedule.
Do you think
So-
that the
I'm not making any suggestion, I'm just relaying facts. That these people, for no good reason that they could say, decided to drive that stretch of road at a time they hadn't planned on doing so. So they had almost an external force suggesting they should be at that point, and that they both arrived, both these people travelling in opposite directions should both get to that same point at the same time and be involved in this is rather freaky. That's just the one aspect of it, and they can't actually explain why they suddenly changed their plans, and that's well documented here. Now, not only that, but in the same newspaper, there was, in the same area of New Zealand, which is just Bay of Plenty area, there was a meteor sparks a flood of flare reports, same weekend, same day, almost within the same hour. But if it was a meteor, I mean, it certainly wasn't. It travelled the whole of the North Island, changing colours as it did so, and it's reported by pilots and from the ground, and it seemed to sustain a flight. Like meteors don't normally do that; they're just transient things. But this travelled up the coast of New Zealand, leaving from this point at this time that this happened, within 30 minutes, as far as I can tell. So what I'm saying is that the chances that these two events aren't related are pretty slim when you read into the area that this happened and the reasons these people were there. Quite strange. In fact, one of these guys here that rescued some other children, he blacked out afterwards.
Fascinating. You wonder if they had the same choice of whether to remember or not.
And also, maybe the landslide was an accident that wasn't meant to happen. I mean, the same thing happened to me. The road started shaking in that area just before I got lifted off, but it was dry. It was the summertime when I was there. They just had some heavy rain, and maybe the same event that was causing this interaction actually created a landslide. So there was an accident not meant to happen.
Well, you do praise Bruce Cathie with his theories, we'll use theories, on how they use electromagnetic lines to take off and to land, and there are some spots, of course, that are perhaps more magnetically in tune with their ships.
Extraordinary amount of sightings in Rotorua area. And even here, even the Maoris have myths and legends about the children of the mist and strange white-featured beings that lived in the clouds, if you like, or in the bush, that they never actually found. They were seen but never traced to where they used to live.
And that's fascinating. Mr. X has suggested that there has been an increase in sightings, or massive amounts, and he was wondering what thoughts you have. Is there something going on, heightened activity?
Well, I can confirm that there are a lot of sightings, and once again, a lot of them are, top half of the North Island. There's even been reports of landings of what I call qualified scientific type people that have actually seen doctors and that. And these people don't normally come forth with this sort of information unless it's dramatic in their life. Reports of occupants getting out of a UFO within sight of these witnesses, which is very rare.
What shape, what type, do you know?
The details have not been released yet, but I'm in contact with Sue Hanson, which runs the New Zealand UFO website, and she gets all the information, or people report to her, well documented, and she runs information and double checks it to make sure it's kosher. And she has on her own website, New Zealand UFO. What's it called?
Yeah, I think it's just the
New Zealand UFO.
UFO.
Anyway,
website,
the reports are certainly beefed up in the last 6 months or a year.
Oh, absolutely. There's been an increase all around the
Yeah,
world.
so, and I have I've got my own little website now, coev.co, whatever it is. Because about it in 2010, I sort of got a tap on the shoulder. I felt there was something telling me that something's important's about to happen.
But
once again, the timing of it is what is, to them it might be 5 minutes, to us it might be 5 years. You've got to wait. You're saying, get ready for it, and I'm sort of waiting for something to happen.
Have you got any idea of what it's going to be?
No idea at all. It's just that you get a sixth sense, an inner feeling that there's something big is going to happen that you could be involved in directly or indirectly, and it's sort of like when you may be getting ready to go to maybe a rugby match or a motorsport event that I used to go to, you get a bit excited.
Yes.
You're packing your bag, or you got your lunch or your drink bottle or something. It's sort of like you're getting ready to go somewhere, and in a sort of a sense I get that impression that get ready, pack your bags, or get your mind into a state for something to happen. The most spectacular sighting I've had, because prior to 1989 I'd never seen a UFO in the sky, never looked.
Well, this is it. Most of us don't look.
About 3 years ago we were having pre-Christmas drinks just down the bottom of this road here, friends of ours. we were just out, and they've got an outdoor barbecue thing, and we were just sitting out having a drink, having a wine. It was just gone dusk, it was just gone dark, about, you know, in December. And up from One Tree Hill, which is just over there, this huge orange globe just comes sailing through the air as large as life. I had no idea how big it might have been. Could have been 30, 40, 50 feet across. And it appeared to only be 1,000 feet or two up. It was travelling about the speed of a slow car, maybe 50 kilometres an hour or so. And I was having a wine with my partner and the two friends down the road. And I said, oh, look at that. And I said, excuse me, I'm just going to go up the front of the road, because they were down in a little bit of an alcove and I couldn't really see that well. I said, some very unusual thing in the sky, you know, that none of the others moved. They were so, they thought it was politically,
They could see it.
I don't even know whether they bothered to look. I pointed to it. They didn't get off their chairs and go and investigate. So I left them. It would have been rude. It must have been rude to go and watch a UFO while you're having a drink with your friends. Like it wasn't like I was at a town hall meeting. We were just having casual conversation, and you see something that you might never see again in your life fly over, like people from another planet. Sorry, we're talking about, I don't know what dress they were going to buy or what colour they might paint their house. So I left them, went up to the front of the street, stood there and watched this huge orange globe, which couldn't be anything that we could conventionally describe, floating at 50k with no noise, silently, ghostly, and it was lit from inside. It was a glowing orange ball, clearly, waltzed across the sky, and then it deflected towards the east over there. It was coming north-south, because One Tree Hill's over there, and a dormant volcano, by the way. Straight across, straight towards me when I was down the bottom of the street, and then it did a very slight curve and headed out to the east and went out over the Gulf, I would imagine, out over the harbour. It disappeared. And of course my car was up here, I couldn't follow it, I wasn't going to anyway. I watched it until it was just a dot in the horizon.
Well, I've seen the red one, and it was from the North Shore looking back over towards you.
It would have come from the North Shore, straight in the line of Auckland to One Tree Hill, right over the top of One Tree Hill.
And it would change colour. It would go from a magenta-y, reddish, pinkish colour, almost this colour here, to, as Alec said, an orange. And the ones that I was seeing that turn on and turn off, they phase in, phase off, phase off. One got very low, right over the house, enough that you could actually make out kind of markings, you know, like you get seams in an aeroplane. You could never really see a physical object totally manifest itself. It would just, like something turned on.
That's
and
interesting,
then it just
because
turned off. You couldn't see a thing, not a dark, nothing, and it would just pulse. And you'll find that a lot of these ones, if you're lucky enough to see them, they pulse.
Yeah, well, on Sue Hanson's website, you know, UFO New Zealand, there were several reports. I think I sent you a copy, of an orange globe. But this one stopped somewhere and got down low, and they said, and it switched the shield off, if you like, and within the orange globe was a very defined craft.
Yeah, well, see, it was
much
miles
more
away
detail.
So we saw it about this, about the size of your thumbnail, and it was looking over your way. It was looking over towards Manly, and of course that is where the airport is. So we made darn sure it wasn't a conventional aircraft, and you can always tell. Red, green navigation light, strobe light. Through the binoculars, no, this thing was just like this red-orange glow, and it would just slowly, as Alex said, go across. It vanished behind a whopping great tree in front of my place, so you're anticipating it's going to come out the other side. Well, it didn't. I ran up the street with the binoculars, it had vanished. It had just completely gone.
Yeah. Well, from these sightings, that people that are watching one of those actually turn it, if you like, its screen off, there is something inside one. And, you know, you could imagine, or trying to imagine what this orange ball could be, you know, like, and when you think of it now, it's almost like a portal or some sort of a canister or something.
Do you think it's possible that you, okay, the red one has been seen by a number of people that were seen, was on the site, but do you think, for example, I think of Billy Meyer, the Swiss farmer who had the contacts way back, and they can narrow the opening so that just an individual may see it because they happen to be standing in that, you know, move 10 feet to the left, 10 feet to the right, you won't see it. Do you think that might have been the case, where in fact you were the only one that did actually see it at the park?
I was the only one interested enough to follow it up, but I mean, it still stuns me to this day that an apparition like that in the sky, which is so clearly not an aircraft, and it didn't have any logical explanation, that people sitting down just casually having conversation and drinking wine couldn't be bothered to make the effort. So I think, well, some people are not ready to know.
Some people would
Well,
just,
they're-
I think,
they're
simply
so
tune it out.
Desensitized that what are you interested in then?
Kim Kardashian's next dress or husband.
I couldn't. I mean, to me, it was.
Sorry, Kim.
It was on a forget 1989. The next most exciting thing that's ever happened, because this was clearly something that has technology beyond what we would expect to see. And here it was displaying itself for me. No shame. It wasn't trying to hide.
No.
It was in clear. There must have been hundreds of people that saw it, I would have thought.
Well, I would have thought hundreds of people would have seen this white.
Right
bright
over the
one
top
that
of
we
Only
saw
Hunter.
4 nights in a row.
On a clear night, no
Because
wind.
even if it was an aircraft, it was too low. I mean, it was so bright and so big, you couldn't miss it.
Yeah.
And hundreds, thousands of people must have seen it. But as it got close to Auckland, it just every single time, 4 times in a row, they would just slowly fade out, nothing.
Because the only thing is, of course, when I'm outside, especially at night,
Yeah.
I'm always looking up. I mean, not continuously, but I'm always glancing.
Oh,
But
I've put some
know a
time
lot of
aside
people
now to
don't.
do some regular UFO spotting.
But
and
I
you see
know a
them.
lot of people don't. People just
No,
look down.
Oh, I think the neighbours think I'm perving at them, but I'm not.
Yeah,
If they
I
observe,
am
I'm
sure
looking
a lot of people, like even I look out here every day and every hour of the day, because I've got a good view of the sky here, and I'm always
Yeah.
looking out there.
Yeah.
If a UFO ever appeared out there, I bet I'd see it.
Well, you would see heaps. My parents used to live on the Thames coast, and you look back towards Auckland, and you'd see them just about every night without fail. And you get what I call the flashes. They just appear like a star coming on, like almost like a flashlight going off in the sky. Got 4 in one night. I was just going down the stairs. They've got one of those bay windows that kind of goes down the stairwell. Bing, ding, ding, ding. 4 go off just like that, and then you can track it because it will keep flashing as it goes across the sky. Sometimes only 2 or 3 times. Got one go over very, very high up, straight up, beautiful clear night about a week ago, and you could track it from where it was flashing. And then another one came back barely 10 minutes later, and almost exactly the same path in the opposite direction. So you're getting all kinds, but this red one I've seen, I don't know whether it's the same kind of orb, for lack of a better word. The bright glowy one that you're
it's just
talking
a
about,
sphere, isn't it?
that
That's all
seemed
I'm
quite
saying.
different. This thing was like a very solid object. This time it was very, very low. I'd been wishing it would come back, and it did, and it would just pulse on. And I saw it through the window, raced outside to get a better look at it, could see it, to what I swear were markings. But it was almost like a dull light shining up underneath the hull. It was, from what I could see, disc shape. As I went around the corner of the house, nothing. It had just gone. But it was getting a bit close for comfort. But I've seen them bigger and closer than that. That was the first one.
I was just basically, I just wanted to see what was, because obviously you just come out in the last 2 years, just come back just to say, hey, look, something's up, something's happening. And so I just wanted to get your input on that, what you felt was going to happen. And you were talking about the dark matter, this
Negative influences. Yeah, but that's. I think that's well covered in history. When you go back to the human, it's almost like that's part of the human race's emotions being used
Farmed.
as a food source.
Yeah.
And that's what that does. And it doesn't have to be evil. But you certainly, if it's driving a negative influence, then it's certainly something we need to be aware of. And you need to, quite honestly, I'm not saying you should chop off your emotions, but I think if you're going to have emotions, then try and make them usable to us as well. Like, in other words, unconditional love and joy and laughter, and think that way instead of negative and hate, because there's not a lot to be gained from negativity and hate. And it might feed the other creatures, but in actual fact it doesn't do us much good. So I'm suggesting to people, don't dwell on the negative. I mean, because you won't change anything by doing so.
So
you feed it. So you've got to, the minute, it's almost like being out of yourself a little bit and becoming self-aware enough to realise that once you're getting into that space, whether it's an external force that's doing it or whether you yourself are creating it, or it might just be the guy next door who got up and started his lawnmower at 7 o'clock in the morning and
heat you off a bit. You just simply got to grab that and change it.
Yeah.
You've got to think of it in terms of a colour. You don't like, say, the colour green. Well, then turn it into a colour you do prefer. That to you is your unconditional love, is your whatever.
Yeah.
You have that ability. We all have it, and I think
our consciousness
really
projects
in the
a long
future,
way
the
into
message I'm getting is
Yeah.
that we're all going to have to learn to be consciously aware of the thoughts we're having and
Yeah.
how we are sending out these colours, if you like, and we
We've,
can
yeah,
change it
we've got
just
a
like that.
powerful, a powerful tool, if you like, that most
Yes.
people aren't aware of, and that is an emotional output. It's huge.
And our ability to change that and create what we
Well,
want.
I mean,
It's a choice.
if it manufactures anything, we might as well manufacture a positive
Yeah.
side of it rather than a negative.
Are we proacting or reacting? And most of us
Yeah.
react.
Well, when I look at the way the world is run, it's certainly negative energies are the most dominant.
Yes.
I mean,
Fear motivation.
the military complex have got it down pat because war, fear of war, or contemplating war, or actually
punishment if
physically
you don't do what
being
we tell you to
involved
do.
in it,
Yeah.
is a fear
Yeah.
factor like no other.
Yeah.
So you have to say, well, that's not going to do us any good. So that, it's almost like they're being controlled by negative entities.
Yeah, it goes up the pyramid.
Yeah.
So you have a positive outlook for our future.
I always have had a positive outlook. I mean, I've been through my negative phases as well, as we all do. I mean, you can still trip over the curb and stub your toe and make it bleed, and you don't have too many loving thoughts for a moment. And it's difficult to control what comes out of your mind, but I think people realise how powerful their minds are and how powerful their consciousness is. It can actually turn you around a bit. It's almost more powerful than a gun.
What did you see?
The cloud out that when I was looking out the bathroom window, which faces south here, there were other clouds in the sky, just very natural looking, brown, some white, some grey, and there was one white one in particular which seemed to be out of focus to all the rest, even though it was slightly further away, and it just was ingrained with lines. It was just made up solely of lines. And when I did a heat, when I put it on the computer, an Apple Mac, and we did a heat analysis of the cloud, inside the cloud was a bell-shaped UFO, or it appeared to be.
I've got to find out what that software is.
So you would have to say that the cloud was just a screening device to hide the object which was in it, and they didn't bother to do a very good job of making it look like a cloud, except that it was a bit fuzzy and it's sort of whitish, and if you at first glance when you look at the sky, it's just a cloud.
And probably most people, if they did think something unusual, would go, oh my, look at that, an unusual cloud. Keep driving.
Only I go and get my camera and say, I've got to get a photo of that for Christ's sake, because that is no normal cloud.
Because you're aware. You've jumped that level beyond where most people will be at to realise that, hey, there is something weird about this.
Well, I might finish recording there. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got
Good as.